Brad Garlinghouse on stage from Binance Blockchain Week. He says 2026 is shaping up to be a breakout year for the crypto market. He also says a ton of other things. So let's just go through the clip. If I need to pause it and give you additional context, I will do that. And I have a few other things I want to show you after this, so don't go anywhere.
Best is yet to come. Brad, why do you think the bears are back in the market?
Well, why the bears back in the market? You know, look, first of all, thank you for having us. I think this is an incredible event. It's my first time to join this event, but hopefully look back to being the next year as well. And so good to see you both. Look, I think crypto has gone through cycles. And when you have risk on, people are excited. They are, now you have kind of a risk off moment. There's uncertainty. I personally will echo some of the things Richard said. There are so many macro factors that are continuing to provide tailwinds for this industry that I think as we go into 2026, I don't remember being this optimistic in the last handful of years, where you do have, as Richard said, regulatory clarity in the largest economy in the world. And I think people underprice this.
Yeah.
22% of global GDP is the United States. And this is a market that has been really openly hostile to crypto for 4 or 5 years, or maybe longer. And now you have that has changed significantly pretty quickly, but the institutions are still catching up with that to some degree. You saw Franklin Templeton on stage here, you saw BlackRock on stage. Just this week, I think Vanguard has now opened up. Vanguard historically has said, we won't touch crypto. And now they've had a massive sea change. That's just one of many things that are creating those tailwinds. And so I'm super optimistic about the year ahead. The last thing I'll say on this, which I think we'll also probably all agree about on this, is we are also seeing real-world applications where it's not just about the speculation. You're finding easier to use interfaces so that crypto isn't just about the speculation, it's about solving real-world problems. And to sustain that long-term optimism, that long-term bull market, I think you're going to see more and more of that.
Brad is so right here, right? We're getting to the point where crypto isn't just about speculation. It becomes about utility and what problems can we solve at scale and how cheaply can we solve those problems using blockchain and DLT, right? We've been using this system for the last 50 years that is just outdated and slow and expensive, and we're tired of just paying for things that we shouldn't really have to. Remember when you used to get charged like 25 cents for a text message, and then you would go over, like, you had 200 text messages a month, and every text message after, you were paying hundreds of dollars a month just to communicate. That's the same problem what we are experiencing with payments around the globe. And this is what this new innovation, blockchain, DLT, XRP, and other assets will be able to get value instantaneously across the world in seconds for a fraction of the cent. That is true power.
What's your take on this too? Do you think the ETF floor was overhyped?
Definitely no. Look, obviously what you were describing is all data correct, but I think you got to zoom out a little bit further and realize that this ETFs didn't exist because of the regulatory problems in the United States. They didn't exist. And in the last 2 or 3 weeks, over $700 million have flown into XRP ETFs, which is just it's pent-up demand from institutional investors, from investors who want access because they don't want to custody themselves, what have you. But look, again, if you zoom out to the macro level, the total ETF market, only 1 or 2% of the total ETF market is crypto. I will bet anybody here that a year from now, that will be more than 1 or 2%.
Yep.
There's going to continue to be inflows, and yes, you can take a snapshot of time and say, okay, there's a billion left Bitcoin ETFs or whatever the data you cited a moment ago. But if you zoom out a little bit further and say, okay, over 2026, do we really think crypto ETFs are only going to be 1 or 2% of the total ETF market? No chance. And so that, again, it's one of those macro tailwinds where Ripple sits in a position where we see, particularly from our Ripple Prime, the prime brokerage business, we see a lot of interesting activity where institutions that have been on the sidelines, maybe because of regulatory clarity, maybe because of risk aversion, for whatever reasons they've been on the sidelines, they're getting involved. And they're starting small, and they're going to walk, then they're going to crawl, then they're going to walk, then they're going to run. And I think it's going to create a lot of tailwind.
Brad's saying here that since they took over, Ripple Prime, we used to be Hidden Road. They changed the name to Ripple Prime. Since they took over that business, they have helped kind of explode that business. I think they've done like a 3x since they took over in May. And so what Brad's talking about here is there was other institutions that were a little maybe scared or they didn't want to use these services that Ripple is offering here because of regulatory clarity. Now those institutions are starting to at least test it and do smaller batches, right? You're saying you're gonna crawl and then you walk and then you run. And that's just like anything, right? An institution needs to get used to using this new technology, but as soon as they start to see how much benefit that they get from it, then they all start going in full blast. And that puts pressure on the rest of the industry, right? If you are a financial institution and you are trying to save your bank or your clientele and whatever it is, if you don't have this new technology and the bank next door does, what type of position does that put you in? And how long can you remain a bank without this new technology? So it forces everybody to use the technology because that is the best technology on the market. Hands down, XRP is one of the assets that I think will be king of the world, in my personal opinion.
So this moment in the market hasn't necessarily spooked institutional capital. That's what you're saying?
Definitely not.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit more about the institutional adoption here and what you're seeing in terms of real world payments as well on the stablecoin side?
Well, I mean, the stablecoin point you're making particularly, I think you are absolutely right that as people kind of went risk off, they stayed on stablecoins, which is indicative of, as Rich was describing, the utility, the 24/7 nature of a stablecoin, but it's also trust, where maybe years ago they might have said, I want to get into a fiat that I trust even more, but people are recognizing that stablecoins can be stable and easier to manage. But look, this region in particular leaned into regulatory clarity early. Ripple launched a stablecoin just over a year ago. It's just passed about $1 billion market cap. But now it's also been approved whitelisted in Abu Dhabi as well as in Dubai and the DIFC. It's
Japan,
good collateral on various platforms from a lending point of view. And I think that the tailwinds just on solving real problems and good collateral that's easy to move and is more flexible and can be moved multiple times a day even, that wasn't possible before. And I think we're going to see a lot of unlocks that, when Ripple thinks about this, and it's an honor to be up here with these two, we want Solana to do great, we want Binance to do great, because I think we're still bringing people into the ecosystem. Stablecoins are one way of doing that. There are going to be lots of other applications, some that Ripple builds, some that are built in the Solana ecosystem, and some that Binance builds.
Speaking of the big guy, President Trump in the US, let's flip it over and talk about what's happening stateside, because, Brad, you've also said in the past that the US regulatory environment is, and I quote here, hostile. So do you think that's changed for the better? And what are you seeing right now in terms of the regulatory roadmap in the United States that will ultimately impact your business as well?
Look, I think one of the things that Binance has done incredibly well, the numbers that Richard's talking about, 300 million people, they're bringing people into crypto. We all want, there's an echo chamber that we all experience of people in crypto. But the amazing thing about the passionate pioneers that are here in this room is they've been in. We just want that audience to grow. And I think what you're seeing happen in the United States with regulatory clarity, Richard earlier referenced the Genius Act. The Genius Act is regulatory clarity for stablecoins. And you're already seeing more institutional interest in stablecoin payments. Ripple purchased a company called G Treasury recently, which has visibility into over $10 trillion of payments from their corporate customers. And the number of those customers who are already, the acquisition closed Monday. The number of those customers that are already approaching us interested in leveraging stablecoins for the flexibility, for better yield, as a trusted resource, because of that clarity, people are leaning in. We don't yet have, obviously Ripple went through a long lawsuit with the US government, and XRP received regulatory clarity from the federal courts.
Really quickly, what Brad said there was pretty interesting. He says, now that the acquisition for G Treasury is complete, that companies that were working with G Treasury are coming to Ripple now, to G Treasury Ripple, and asking about stablecoins and other technologies that Ripple has. They're interested in now using them now that they are available, right? And they have top 1,000 corporate clients. $12.5 trillion a year is moved. That's $34 billion a day through G Treasury. And now they can do all of that using XRP, using RLUSD, using the technology stack that Ripple has provided. Just let that sink in, right? Because this is one company that moves $12.5 trillion a year. What is the next company and the next company, right? And you get 2, 3, 5, 10 of these companies. Now you're moving 250 billion, 500 billion. Now you're moving $1 trillion. And this is how you build liquidity to be able to service the entire world.
We have been championing, and I know Team Solana has been championing regulatory clarity for crypto broadly in what is generally called the Clarity Act in the United States. There's still forward momentum on that. I don't think it's going to happen this year, which the President Trump has kind of championed. But I think sometime in the first half of next year, we'll see passage of legislation, which will continue to unlock and create more tailwinds for the whole industry. I'll go out on the limb and I'll say Bitcoin 180,000 December 23rd or December 31st, 2026.
All right, where's the prediction market around that now?
So a few things here. At the end, Brad talked about regulation, the Clarity Act, Q1 maybe 2026. It does seem like this got moved. We heard early, mid-year, it was like, oh, Clarity Act, maybe September. Then it was maybe October. Then it was maybe Thanksgiving. Now it's probably next year. So unfortunately, the can has been kicked down the road. But the benefit here is XRP has clarity. The rest of the crypto market doesn't. So this does benefit Ripple directly because the products that they use are built around the XRP ledger. So you start to part of me is like, I like this. Let's keep kicking clarity down the road because this is going to help Ripple and XRP. But part of me is like, if we get clarity for the rest of the industry, more people will come in and participate. So, you kind of feel like, it's like when you find out about XRP and you set a goal of how much XRP you want to get and the price starts to go up and you're like, would I rather have the price, shoot through the roof now? Or would I rather have the price stay lower so I can buy more? Half the people are going to say, I want the price to go up. And half the people are going to say, I want the opportunity to buy more. So I just think that's funny. And then taking a look here, obviously we got some, new information about ETFs and flows, 21 shares. Last major resistance is gone. Vanguard joins the crypto ETF opening up the door to 50 million customers. Index pioneer, index crypto innovator. So here you go. Here are some of the products listed there. Pretty cool. Chad said crypto ETFs are back. And you heard Brad Garlinghouse say that right now crypto ETFs represent about 1% to 2% of the entire ETF market. He believes next year that number could be even higher. He didn't give a percentage there. I was listening for that. But even if we get to 3, 4, 5%, that is trillions of more dollars going to be able to come into the space. And hopefully that could mean a lot of goodness for the crypto market in general. Obviously, not all ETFs are created equally. Not all were going to succeed, but the biggest and best ones will have a lot of value here in the future. And XRP becomes the second fastest set of ETFs to reach 800 million assets under management in ETF history. So behind Bitcoin, it actually beat out Ethereum. It looks like that's pretty cool. Now with over 400 million in XRP held by asset managers, while only one fund has been trading for 2 full weeks. That is pretty awesome. And then you did see this clip here on Fox News. This is Paul Atkins. Paul Atkins is the SEC head. That used to be Gary Gensler under the Biden administration. We know how terrible that went. Paul Atkins, I personally think, has been doing an incredible job bringing the SEC and the CFTC together so they can have harmonization on their rulemaking, as well as setting rules for the industry and working with companies like Coinbase and the Ripples of the world so that they can get it right now because it's so important.
Do you expect this is where financial services is going? Are the major banks and the brokers out there today moving increasingly toward tokenization?
Absolutely. And it's the
Hold on a second. We just got to back it up. Okay. This is the Fox News person asking the SEC head, the guy who's in charge of the SEC, about what institutions are doing, right? So we got to really listen to this because they're basically giving us the game here. Okay, let's back it up.
Are the major banks and the brokers out there today moving increasingly toward tokenization?
Absolutely. And it's the way the world will be, here in maybe not even in 10 years, maybe even a lot less time, maybe a couple of years from now. So I think that all of this modernization of the markets, I think, is good. And the trouble that we've seen here over the past few years is that the SEC, unlike historically, it never was necessarily at the vanguard of pushing new innovations. It was always a little bit behind the market, of course. But here recently, it's been almost standing athwart the marketplace, and as all these new innovations were coming about. So that's no more. We're actually embracing it, and I believe that we need to be embracing it to keep the United States at the forefront.
There it is. Just in a few years, he thinks, not another decade. Just in a few years, all of these markets will be on chain. Settlement will happen through your XRPs and other assets. And this is what we want for total innovation in America. We want to jump ahead from the rest of the world. To do that, we need everybody in the game doing what they need to be doing, setting the rules so corporations and institutions can use this market to the full extent of what they're trying to do. And this is how we go from a $2, $3, $4 trillion market to a 50 or $100 trillion market over the next 5 to 10 years. It is so exciting to be on this journey. We have this down, guys. Thank you so much for being here. I'll stop it there. Appreciate you. Thank you for your time. If you got any value, you can like, you can share, you can leave a comment down below. Just thank you for being here. I'm Crypto Sensei. You have a fantastic day. I'll see you in the next one. Aloha.